All right, here we are back with another episode of Mindfully Gay, and I think we're just going to pick up where we left off last time. This is kind of a three-part series talking about physical, mental, and spiritual fitness, and we thought that'd be kind of a fun topic to kind of dive into. And we started with the physical part, and I'm just remembering some things that Nick was talking about that I think will lead really well into this episode, because I think, you even showed it as you were talking about just your passion for, working out, training people, teaching people. I mean, you just came to life, and there was a light about you that just was illuminating while we were talking, and I think that is the piece, or how do I want to say this? Is that track or path towards what we're starting to talk about today and in our next episode, whereas, mental fitness and then that spiritual fitness. Because I think when you have kind of that opening and know that passion and how it fills you up, there's something quite, I think, spiritual about that.
Most definitely.
But before we kind of get to that end of the road there, I thought we'd talk about mental fitness and, what does that mean and how does someone achieve that? So that's kind of the question for us on the table. Maybe thinking about what we talked about in physical fitness, what's mental fitness?
Okay, so we're going to stay focused on mental.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, what's mental fitness?
Penis.
One more round.
I think, no, John, I appreciate you saying that very much. And I think that, for me personally, what you're saying, so me having this passion in this process for myself and for other people in this physicality and kind of chaperoning them through this process, you're right. And for me personally, I know that getting that set down first as kind of a foundation, I think is what allows me to approach the work that I need to do on mental. And the way that I would do that, for me, meditation is the place, I think, where I start first. Because it was through my meditation practice, certainly in my 30s, I'm 46 now, I don't know, 40-something. But certainly, basically all throughout my 30s was just tormenting myself with just ridiculous. Now that we're reading the Four Agreements, with book club, just the assumptions and just the stupid cyclical stuff and the just making up the things that we all do. And it was then that I found meditation. And it was then that I started understanding, at least started practicing the ability of just recognizing that crazy cyclical stuff when it's happening, recognizing it, and then really getting to the point where I could stop it. Because my understanding is stopping that type of vortex of crazy when you can acknowledge it first. That's the first step. Acknowledge that it is happening and just observe. But then beyond that, the ability to pause it so that you understand that by doing so, you open yourself up to what the day can bring. And it's just it was a huge mind shift for me from being in my 30s and having just the vortex of negativity going on and on, finding meditation, and it allowed me to just slow that craziness down so that I could appreciate what was in front of me in the real world.
I wanted to ask, well, how did you just discover meditation? Because based on what we talked about last time, as far as kind of our finding kind of that spiritual fitness and mental fitness, and starting with the physical, because we know our bodies, or we can get more acquainted with our bodies, and we can start from that physical place to take those steps towards kind of this air quotes enlightenment. Was it a physical thing that guided you to meditation? Because I'm curious, well, how did you find meditation?
Yeah, no, so I was really lucky in that my strength coach, the person that programs for me for the Olympic programming that I do, his name is Lee Skinner, and he shut the fuck up. And he programmed for me meditation. It was mandatory part of my program, 10 minutes every day. And it was something that he gave me permission. That's exactly what it was. Of course, I knew what meditation was. I had ideas about it. I thought I would levitate or whatever, just silly, stupid shit. But then it was when it was given to me as part of my program, and it led me into, okay, I'm going to actually do this. And that, I found a couple of apps. I worked through different apps. I think, what was that? Squarespace. What was it? Headspace. Yeah, that was the first one that I worked with. And so it was because it was given to me in programming for my training. And so it really was, talk about coming from a physical, your path of physical. And then I was just fortunate enough that this person knew, he's very much a holistic approach to the work that he does. And I was fortunate enough that he programmed it for me. So that I was given that command, I guess, and I followed it that way.
Well, there is some interesting research on performance athletes, and I'm thinking, particularly, I'm aware of some research that was done with like gymnasts, but I think it's true of other sports that the part of the training is active visualization.
Yeah, right.
To like go through the routine to visualize it, and what they're suggesting that even the power of deeply visualizing it, that there's still a muscle response in the body,
right,
and that the performance outcomes are quite incredible. And so even what you're talking about, and why I'm imagining your friend Lee would make that suggestion is, if people can visualize and see and engage their brain around that functioning, they're more likely to fully execute and accomplish what they're
makes sense. You're giving it a test run in your mind, a make believe. And this, Jerry, I'm so glad we're talking about this right now. This is why before we train, I send the program for you, because I expect you to go through each movement and see yourself performing.
I'm like, what the fuck is this? No.
No, it's true. Half the time I don't really know what the names are for the exercises, so it's just this thing in the training world. There's like 9 different names for the same thing, and so yeah. But anyway, but no, I agree. I think that that visualization work, and maybe again that is another step from the physical into the mental aspect of what of health is. That's a really interesting one. I don't know that I've applied that so much for my own training, but maybe that's something that we'll start doing.
I'm going to shift this a little tiny bit, because I'm thinking about, right, we're mindfully gay, and we're talking about like our identities and how we engage the gay community. And as a therapist who's had a lot of training in cognitive forms of therapy, how fully conscious I am when I work with people, or even sometimes I'm just kind of listening to people, I can very quickly assess what assumptions, beliefs, and stories they carry about themselves, and how they operationalize those beliefs, how it shows up. Right. And so I'm here lately been very conscious of the concept of aging, and I will frequently hear people my age defer to a problem that they're having, saying, well, I guess that's what happens when you get old.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? And there's this part of me that used to really align myself with that. And I'm been shifting and working on that paradigm. And I told you about my friend Charles, who's almost 90, who told me probably about 10 years ago that he was going to be in an active rebellion against the concepts of aging. And what he was telling me is, I'm just not going to align myself with those stories. But I think in our culture, there's a very strong, prevalent narrative, in this case, about aging. And I think a lot of people live up to that. And then I think we do this in terms of our gay identities, right? I can't begin to tell you how many times I've had gay clients come into my office and blame their circumstances on the gay community. Now, in contrast, I've worked with a lot of straight people too, and I've never had a client come in and say, I'm just so tired of heterosexuality.
Fucking breeders. Yeah. I'm sure it never. Yeah.
I've had gay people complain about straight people, but never have I had straight people diagnostically determine that their problems were around their sexual orientation, and yet it seems to be a very common narrative amongst gay folks. And we talked a little bit about this last night in the book club, and maybe this is where we can kind of shift some of the dialogue, is when we talk about the events we're trying to host or that we are hosting, when we talk about the retreats, we become very conscious of folks carrying particular narratives that then restrict their movement.
Yeah.
Like, I like the idea, but I'm afraid of it. And to me, this mental health process, this mental fitness, and we talked about this in the book club last night, is, Ruiz would talk about in the agreement about make no assumptions, that we have to get to the root of the stories that we carry and be willing to challenge them at the core, giving an opportunity to a new experience or a new way of looking at things. And so I'm wondering how this plays into the discussion around.
Well, I think it does play into it, because it is about, the stories, that the mental games that we really kind of play with ourselves, and around our identity and how we show up in our community, etc. So I think it fits perfectly with this conversation about kind of mental fitness, and to the point about inviting people to show up to our events, whether it's our social events, our book club, and then our retreats. Like you said, people are very interested and they want it, but they're afraid of it. And that's what, in a way, it does baffle me a bit, but I understand it. They're afraid of afraid of what they want.
Yeah.
And what is that mental block? What's that wall, that barrier that's keeping them from showing up?
It's confidence, is it? Is it? I mean, I don't know. For me, I reflect a lot on past, specifically high school years, specifically sports in high school. And I sometimes get angry because I didn't participate more in things because I was afraid, and I didn't have the confidence, to be. I am absolutely an athlete, and I could have played all of them. I could have lettered in all of those sports. I know I could have. Now I do. Now I have the confidence. And so that's why I think to some degree it is a confidence issue, and I think it's one that in general gay people suffer from, because we've been living in a way that all of us for the most part were taught is wrong, and trying to find an idea of our true self, it often just feels like just trying to get by and just to survive sometimes. And so I don't know, I wonder if it's an issue of confidence. It's also an issue of assumptions, like we're talking about people making a lot of assumptions about what other people are going to think or interpret or perceive as if they do participate and they fail at it or something. But I think ultimately, I don't know, I feel like it is a confidence thing. I know, it's funny, just last night I was having this conversation with my partner in that, this in particular, this I've loved. This is just natural to me. I'm with two people that I care about, and I'm talking about things, and it's just wonderful. I love doing this, but game night and social events, and I'm someone that can just stay home. I really am. I grew up alone. My parents worked down in the city. I was in the mountains. I was alone every summer. I was alone. Like, I just grew up by myself. And I have no problem with just being home alone. It's a perfectly fine thing. My partner, on the other hand, definitely the opposite. Social, huge personality, just walk out your front door in Boston, there's 10,000 people. That's what he always had. And so I'm telling him, I'm doing this, I'm pushing myself into these spaces where I am uncomfortable, because I know that it's going to bring about the medicine that we need right now. We need this social, we need to connect with other people and feel good about ourselves in this world. And so I don't know. I think, back to your point, the hesitation, the buying the tickets and standing outside and watching type of thing, or, it's the hesitation to jump in and be a part of the community. Maybe because it's a self-confidence issue, or maybe it's also because ideas of what our community could be that are mainstream are maybe not the reality of what it is that we have here.
I keep going back to that checklist. Like there's this finite checklist of what you're supposed to be and do and look like to be gay and in the gay community. And if you do not check any of those boxes, or you miss one, just one, then you're out. And I relate to that. I mean, even just the story about like social stuff. It's easy for me just to stay at home. I'd rather stay at home. I'm more introverted anyway, and so I really have to push myself to go to a thing. It's not so much about introversion and extroversion. It is a worry that I have at times. It's how will I be received? Will people like me? If I talk about yoga, if I talk about this or that, will people be interested? Do I have to put on, which mask do I have to put on? Which face do I need to put on to be accepted? Do I have to be this jovial John guy, or can I just be the subdued, quiet guy that I often am? And so it's always a question of how will I be received when I show up? And that's a mental game. That's a mental thing that I've got to kind of play with and work with, not every single time, but a lot of the time. Especially if it's a situation where I've never been before and I'm not sure how things are going to go. But I think what I do in some cases, just going back to this, the studies with the athletes and the mental visual, the visualization of they see themselves doing the sport, or when you write out your programs, you give it to your client and they can read it and start to visualize themselves doing it. I do the same thing.
Same.
I do the same thing. I'll either run it through my head, even trivial things like I'm going to a store that I've never been to before. I'll practice driving to that store. Totally. So I know how to get there and not get lost and all that kind of stuff. But I'll have to do that with social events too. And I almost have to practice, well, how can I show up? What can I say?
Let me ask you, because I absolutely, John, like very much the same page with you. I do this incessantly. And is it a good movie that you're seeing? Is the movie good that you see in your mind?
Right.
Or is it maybe not? Because unfortunately for me, I know in my 30s, it was never a good movie. It was never a positive outcome. And I have gotten better. I brought this up the other day, 2 book clubs ago, 2 times ago, and before everyone showed up, and it was, this was the topic of don't make assumptions. No, what was it before? Don't make assumptions.
Don't take things personally.
Don't take things personally. So it was kind of about that, and I was telling you how I was starting to get all of these clients. It was really making me happy. I was really getting high with it, about thinking about them all day long. But and my question for you was, is that a dangerous practice for me? I'm running these movies of what could be, and they're all extremely positive. Like I'm making tons of money, and everyone's really happy or whatever. Like I'm doing that, and my question, and it does. It's not that it's exhausting. It does take energy to do it, but then after it starts to slow down, it is kind of like, damn, I really hope things turn out the way that I just really felt like they were going to. And then if they don't, then what? And so it's.
Let me use that paradigm, and you tell me if this is useful or not.
Okay.
I am 59. Things slow down. Metabolism changes. And I get that Nick is really ambitious in the training, but I probably should go lighter and move slower. I just really should be careful.
Ain't gonna happen.
Because I don't want to get too enthusiastic about this.
Oh my God! All right.
Now, would you want me as your client to do that? Why?
No.
Why?
No, I don't want you to do that. Because first of all, that's not what we're fucking doing. We're balls to the walls every time we train.
But why? Why? If I just showed up and
you're closing yourself off to it.
I'm closing. Like if I go there and frankly, when I'm on the Stairmaster, I think about places where I want to go hiking. I think about Bell's Falls, right? That whole 2-mile Stairmaster exercise, right?
Wow.
Right? And Every time I get on that Stairmaster, I visualize with precision getting to that waterfall.
Okay, that's great.
And I get excited when I'm on, you kind of chastise me for working, but I get kind of excited about what's happening because my brain is engaging this idea of possibility.
Yes.
And I would say energetically,
Yes.
by engaging that place,
Yeah.
I'm in the vibration of manifestation.
Yes, I'm with you, but that's my question then. Am I vibrating too much in manifestation when I'm like, wow, I'm gonna have a Bentley? I mean, I don't know. It's not like that. It's not a materialistic so much thing, but it's just, it's a happy, everyone's happy. I'm transforming bodies and lives. And
What does it mean to have too much? Where does that story come from?
Okay.
But this comes up all the time, and I have a philosophy about it, but I'm going to ask you, what is it about having too much that edges you out?
This is what I'm saying. It's that I wonder if it's dangerous for me to anticipate that much abundance when the reality of what happens is maybe not the same. So I've got a client I work with 2 times a week. I'm visualizing his family's going to want to start training with me, whatever. Because we're having conversations and he's saying things every now and then. So I think it might be happening. And then the reality comes up that it doesn't, and kind of the letdown. And so I guess that's the only guard that I have with pursuing this idea of just being in a place of perpetual abundance and that vibration. I get it. I've definitely been in those places of that vibration and I can feel it. And it's a very happy place. It's just that I'm concerned that when the reality of what happens and the litigation of the two, or whatever, the comparison of the two and what that means, how that affects me in maybe kind of a negative way.
I'm missing where it's a negative.
Because I'm anticipating tremendous abundance, but then the reality of what actually happens, it's not quite there.
Yeah. Yet.
Okay.
Right. So, look, and somebody who does lots of work around manifestation, I recognize that I'm putting a seed out there, like we did in our little ceremony, right? We put a seed out there, and in one way or another, people show up, and then what do I do with that? Do I take advantage of that opportunity? Do I seed that opportunity, if you will, and encourage it to grow into this thing of community, right? That's kind of what we were doing here in this space.
Right.
And you're trying to create an atmosphere and a process of clients who are coming and engaging. And I know you well enough that you want clients who are going to be motivated to see results because you feed off that, right? Manifestation isn't like, it can be, but you keep wanting to defer to reality, and I'm going to argue that there is no such thing.
Okay, I like that. Okay.
Look, we did a lodge the other night, and there were things happening in that lodge energetically. I was saying things in that lodge. I'm like, I clearly felt like I was channeling some ancestral knowledge, wisdom, whatever.
Martha Walsh, no?
Martha Walsh.
Martha Walsh.
And as I was reflecting on that lodge, I thought, oh man, like, did I just set that guy up and blah, blah. Well, he came to the house the other day, and his health, his attitude, his disposition was so incredibly transformed. I mean, he came to the house specifically to bring a gift to say, I don't know exactly what happened, but something shifted.
That's very cool.
Right? And I would argue that the reality that we engaged in was not this one.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know we're getting into the spiritual, but I think whatever we end up doing, like I would argue that when we think about getting too much abundance, that is Christian dogma that's been crammed down our throats that keeps saying, don't ask for too much. And yet what I would argue is the other world, the spirit world, the ancestral world, is ready to show up and to help you to recognize an ultimate potential that may be on your imagination.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I think what we do is, is it the law of attraction? We can manifest and ask, and so I want that Bentley, I want that $1,000, or I want that great client, but we put our own limitations and walls in front of the manifestation of it all.
Ask.
The ask. In front of the ask. Because we can ask and ask, and the spirits, however you want to visualize that counsel, they're ready. They're ready to give. You want that? We're ready to give it. But if you're putting up your own walls, but I'm not sure, and I'm not the right age, or I don't have enough money, or I'm too busy, or I'm too this, I'm too that, or I'm not enough this or that. You put up your own limitations, and so you're not going to receive what you're asking for.
The mental fitness is the willingness to confront the limitation of the belief that's brought us to this place. And so if I'm depressed, I can blame it on lots of things, but ultimately I've got to be able to go within and to ask myself, what is the narrative that is running the depression or the anxiety? When people hesitate to get in, as we were talking about these hesitations, right? I was kind of listening to you guys and I thought, well, I have to wonder, what are the stories that kind of drive that anxiety or that hesitation? And I believe maybe a very authentic place for both of you, and I think I know you both, is the place of solitude, which, great, be in alignment with the solitude. But when I hear people saying, I would really like to show up, but then I'm really curious about what is the narrative that's driving the but. Because that can be adapted. And it's not just about changing the mental belief.
Right.
I have to bring that belief into my body.
Yes.
And I have to allow myself to go into the place of meditation or fantasy and to experience the shift. And to take notice of how my body changes, how my energy changes in alignment with that new story. And then how do I foster it? How do I nurture it?
Right.
And I always use the story of Peru, and we've talked about this in the podcast, but when people get saturated in a new experience or a new belief, they're then able to kind of adapt into the place of where they want to be.
Right.
So I think it's a process.
It is a process. Definitely a process. And thinking about just kind of the work that you do, and I previously did as far as psychotherapy, I did cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's getting you can do both ways. Meaning you can put establish a thought. That's the cognitive. I would like to be more social. Maybe that's the thought. I would like to be more social. But you're not actively doing that, and don't feel like you can at this moment. You can, for kind of the person who's not familiar with kind of these therapeutic terms and practices and whatnot, I think we can use something like, fake it till you make it. Keep telling yourself that you want to do that. Because I think even just saying it starts to create that shift in your cognition, in your thinking, and you might find yourself slowly making steps towards actually behaving in that way.
There is actually a technique in cognitive behavioral therapy that has some pretty good research behind it. When people get depressed, what do? They get melancholy. They stay in bed. They engage in behaviors that would equal depression.
Yes.
And so if I can get that person to commit to a schedule, I'm going to get up at 8 a.m. I'm going to have my breakfast. I'm going to take a shower. I'm going to go for a walk around the block. If I can get that person to engage in non-depressive behaviors, whether they want to or not, the research would show that after a very short period of time, they will actually, their symptoms of depression will diminish.
Right.
And they'll be able to transition out of their depressive episode.
That makes sense. And I do have to say, back to the getting into that place of imagining abundance, getting really high on the feelings of good of all the people I'm going to help. The thing that I do notice that isn't with me, that was definitely in the 30s, is that imposter syndrome voice. I have encountered it with a few clients that intimidate me just because they're highly intelligent, and sometimes I think that they're going to see through me. I don't know what that's stupid, but for the most part, I am actually that is something I'm recognizing I'm able to do. I am doing the visualization. I am in that very happy place, and then it actually is happening. I mean, I actually am bringing on more clients, and they're referring me to more people, and I have 3 people right now on hold because I'm not sure I can. Like, it is happening,
Right?
And so. And it is, I guess it is the practice of what you're saying. It's not staying in a place of, I can't do this. It's faking it till you make it in your mind a bit. That's what I've been doing. But then I'm actually, oh my God, I'm actually doing it. Like, I'm actually getting up at 8 a.m. and eating my breakfast. You know what I mean? I'm participating in the behaviors that actually are the thing that I wanted in my mind. Like, the thing that I was visualizing, I'm actually doing it. It actually is happening before my eyes. I'm actually making it happen physically. It is manifesting.
Right. And things start to show up. You might ask for something, and it might even be quite specific, but when it eventually does show up, it may not be in the form that you exactly.
This is true.
Visualize.
Right.
It does show up, but it might be in a different form, right? Yeah. And it's it's a matter of, again, getting out of our own way and broadening our mind scope so that we can, I am doing this. This is happening. This is showing up. Because if our view is so narrow, it's like, well, it's got to be like this. It's got to be this way. It's got to be this way. And I certainly have yoga clients like that, where, they'll say, John, I want to learn how to do yoga, and I'm teaching them yoga. And I usually, I give a lot of permissions. Like, well, if you feel like you want to move your leg this way and turn your foot out this way because you have a knee issue or whatever, it's perfectly fine to do that. You have permission to do that. But in their mind is, no, I have to do it this way. Yeah. But is that the right way? And so we can be really narrow scoped in our work like that, and especially in our manifestation sometimes too. But if we can kind of loosen it up a little bit and expand that way of thinking, we'll see that a lot of what we're asking for is showing up, and it's right there. It's just right there.
I'm with you, yeah.
Well, I think I shared with you guys a couple sessions ago how my New Year's focus was about increased pleasure.
Right.
And it's interesting because in my mind, this is a body, mind, spirit focus. This issue of pleasure. And I've worked out a lot throughout my life, and I don't know, I think it's because I've invited my mind to be open to this perspective, but even though the workouts are challenging and hard, my mind and my heart is aligning with the pleasure of a body that's doing it, that's feeling it. Even some of my spiritual practices, which I do a lot of work for people in that context, but I've noticed by opening myself up to the narrative of pleasure that I'm having much deeper experiences, and it doesn't feel as laborious. And I've also noticed that it's impacted my willingness to speak what needs to be spoken to. And so I've just...
You're changing your own narrative.
By calling in the narrative of pleasure, my mind is now alerted to, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
If my mind is around improved health, right, I may think twice about what I order at Burger King, or whether I go.
Right. Whether you even go, I like it. Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah.
Again, because the mind will go into these interesting justifications.
Yeah.
And yet if I saturate myself with a particular focus, I can execute that. But I want to go back, because I want to make sure we spend some time with this on the podcast, because I'm not convinced we're there. What is it about? So you were talking about the confidence issue in terms of who I am as a gay person, maybe closeted in relationship to straight people, and the fear and anxieties about showing up or being confident enough. But I'm really curious about what are the narratives, what are the stories that we carry amongst ourselves in relationship to each other as gay people. I may see gay people at the gym. I may be seeing gay people out in the community. I may see them on social media, right? And I believe what Ruiz again would say in his book, and what I believe is based in some psychological studies as well, we're always running narratives. It's not like our mind is absent of a narrative. And so when it comes to this relationship of being with gay, we're going to go to gay pride. What does that look like? How do we experience that? I know for me, I immediately start fussing about what am I going to wear. And not that I care a whole lot. And yet in that environment, I get really preoccupied about how I'm going to look. I want us to get into the place, what is the mental challenges and barriers? And I think, I mean, if I were just being honest about myself, and I'm not really prepared to say it, but I think I can always see somebody who looks better, and if you look better, then somewhere in my psychology is the belief that you're somehow more worthy, more acceptable, more desirable. So much so that I will miss any attention that I might get. And I've had people point this out to me several times where I'm just clueless. But I think it's because I have so projected out the idea of being gay acceptable based on appearances. And I feel like that's like cheap for me to say, but if I'm just really honest, if I go to a club, if I go to a pride event, right, there's this anxiety at that level. And sometimes that anxiety is so great, I think I'd just rather not go.
Right. I think that's very significant and true and honest, because I think many people can relate to that. Going to a club, gay pride, that's probably the first thing. I know that's the first thing that I think about, like, what am I going to wear? How do I look? Do I need to slim down? Do I need to muscle up? Do I need to look...
You have to eat lettuce 2 weeks before.
Right. and I do that. I mean, I have done that. Because I want to look a certain way so I can be accepted or feel accepted.
Wanted.
Wanted, exactly. And I think that's maybe top 5, if at least not top 3, of the stories that we tell ourselves that restrict us from showing up. But I'm also thinking, so what is it about even a game night, a movie night, book club, watching the Super Bowl? What is it then? Is it, what am I going to wear? What do I look like?
Do you think, though, that going back to Harry's ideas about object,
Yeah.
do you think we've just become so socialized as gay people to only factor in the physical component that the idea of socializing outside of that is intimidating?
Yes.
Or it's hard to even understand because you're just not programmed to think. I mean, you're right. It is very... Of course, it's the hookup apps that drive this. Of course, it's the Instagram accounts with the shirtless dudes that are all living the dream or whatever. It's what we have out there as visuals of examples of what happy gays, I guess, are. But there's no... but that is... I guess that is what's the socially acceptable idea of gay people, is that you have to be buff and whatever, tits out. So that's what's in the modern world. That's what's kind of up on the pedestal, I guess, as an example of gay life, and there's just so many people that can't meet that don't there's just so many other sides of what gay life is actually about, and it is about pain, and it is about suffering, and it is about all the other things that don't get put up on a pedestal, but no one ever sees those aspects so much. And so I don't know, I think it's difficult to have any different understanding other than that.
I want to reframe the question for a minute.
Yeah.
Like if we were to pull up Scruff or Grinder, or what's this new one, Sniffies? No, Sniffles or something?
Yeah.
Which is so interesting because I've had it described to me like, Sniffles? What's a sniffle? Anyways, what is it about those of us who are writing profiles who would dare to say, no fats, no femmes, no one over the age of 32, no racial identities? It is very interesting when you look at these apps and how people are posturing themselves. I'm wondering what's the psychology, what is the mentality of an individual who creates a menu list.
But that's just the point I think that I'm saying, is that the garden they have growing within and the fertilizer and the seeds and everything that's been put in there is from this idea that we are objects, that I don't know, that you go out on the weekends and party and you're hooking up on apps, and I don't know, it's just that those are the ideas of what you can request, I guess. I don't know, I'm not saying the person is not guilty of something that they should be responsible for when they write a profile like that. I'm not saying it's fully just programming from the outside world, but I think I don't know, I think it has a lot to do with that tribalism crap. And I don't know, Jerry, maybe I'm not answering the question right, but I just think that a person that writes a profile like that is writing a profile like that because they've been taught somehow that that's the profile that you're supposed to write in order to get the objects or the things that you're supposed to get as a gay person. I don't know.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
I do, and I'm figuring out how to even formulate words because I'm having feelings about that.
Well, I'm glad you just said that, because I'm like, how do we feel? Like, if we just feel into that for a minute, right? These people who, and maybe we do it, I don't know, but we create a profile that says, here's what's ideal. How does that leave us feel? I know I feel overwhelmed by it.
I feel hurt by it. Because I think it's a reflection of a larger topic in regards to what is the standard, or what is thought to be the standard in this country, as far as what you look like and who you are and who you, and how to be on that top tier. White, male, healthy, etc. And so when we see those profiles, no femme, no fats, no
Asians, no blacks.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's a reflection of that. Of I'm just going to say it, just kind of the racism in this country. And so it hurts me. And didn't always, because I think I was a part of it. I was just a part of that story. And so, and I think I'm sure I have done that too when I was creating profiles at the beginning. And so now when I see them having a different perspective, it's a total turnoff. But emotionally, I get emotional and I get angry. And I know these aren't the people I want to be around, if they're gay or not. So that's a tough one for me. But I think it does fit into this, this talk about, our community as a gay community, and what the standard is, and what we think the standard is. And some are, I guess, bold enough to put it in a profile.
To show their racism, yeah.
So, I know I get labeled as Pollyannish. And for those of you under 40, go look that up. Pollyanna was a very optimistic person. But I think this way. Like, I get into this conversation. I feel overwhelmed. I feel hurt by it too. As someone who's 59, who's kind of moving into this different part of my life, I start to feel definitely marginalized. And that doesn't work for my ego. No. But I believe, and I don't want us to respond to this right away. I just want us to like visualize it for a minute, to go into our brain process for a minute. And because I believe this gets kind of grandiose, so hold on. I believe that something like Mindfully Gay has the potential to shift the cultural narrative. This podcast has the potential, at the very least, of broadening the conversation. Yes. But I would like to believe in broadening the conversation, shifting the cultural narrative. We have a lot of football coaches who are sitting home watching TV, calling the shots or having opinions about what's happening. And I believe this podcast is an invitation to get people off the couch. Absolutely. And to be actively engaged in shifting the narrative.
Right, because the movement that you're talking about, that shift of movement, it requires their contribution.
Exactly.
It can't be us three. Yeah.
So if we were sitting here, like we did the other day, what do we visualize? How do we see it? If you were describing it to our listeners or our viewers, how would we describe the trajectory of this vision?
Well, I've got to jump on something that John said, because we were talking this in group text. And I really, it's the space to practice. That's huge. God, I don't know why that makes me emotional, but you're right. Understandably, you would be offended by those profiles, and we have to change. We have to work on changing these things, and that's what this community effort is. It's us coming together and creating some space where we can practice that change. By accepting everyone, and it's not about no fats, no femmes, no Asians, or whatever. It's not about those ridiculous things. It's about suspending that and coming into this space and practicing being social with each other without these expectations and these labels and these perceived outcomes that are either going to be an orgy or not, and it's a failure if it isn't. But whatever. I really liked it, John, when you said, so to answer your question, Jerry, like, what is that? It's going to be an effort. It's got to be energy. We've got to come together and contribute our energies to this effort to change this together. And I think that how that starts is by showing up and practicing, just being social with people. It's not about looking at dick pics. It's not about anything like that. It's just about talking and connecting and meeting people that might not have been what you would want to attract to your profile online, but it's just a deeper, more tangible, connection with those people and a better understanding of what the community really is. And so I think, I really hung on to that one, John. Like it's space to practice.
Mm-hmm. In that practicing, and I think we've been talking about this, is giving people certainly an opportunity to reframe their story, to even rewrite their story, to present their story, and then to do some reframing around it. And the reframing is perhaps just seeing it a little differently. How maybe your struggle could actually be a strength, and certainly a strength to someone else, because someone will certainly relate to your struggle, and there's a connection, right? Just in having a it's an opportunity for gay men to come together in these social events and just social events to really just be themselves. They can let their guards down and be heard and listen to other stories and see how we're all really are connected because of those stories that we share with one another.
So let's say we're realizing this vision of community, connection, practice, reframing. We're realizing the vision. How will we be different? How would we know that it's happening? Like, how would we be different in the manifestation of
I know, because just exactly what you said. When we're at the gym and we see gays, we see certain gays, older gays, younger gays, and what you do in your mind when you see them. Like, I know what I do when I see daddy granddaddy gays. Like, I know what I'm thinking. It's got to be a shift in that. It's got to be, no, he's not a sexual predator, or whatever the stupid idea I have in my mind is. Like, it's gonna be a shift in that, Jerry. I think for me personally, when I'm looking at people and I don't look at them as an object or what I've just traditionally done for so long when I size up fellow gays. It's instead thinking, oh, this is a potential member of our community that could use some medicine and probably has some medicine for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's a shift in that sense. And that's what I think that that is what it feels like for me. That's what this has been doing for me, for sure. And it has been, I have been sharing parts of myself that I have never shared before. I'm presenting my story, my actual story of who I am. And I've never done that before. I presented a story that is, I have played a porn star on TV essentially, but I'm not. I'm something different, and so it's that type of work. It's that type of shift. It's this place where I can do that, but then I carry that openness to what the story is, and I start to apply it to other people when I see them, as opposed to just thinking, oh, that dude's probably got a harness at home. He goes to circuit parties on the weekend or whatever. It's not that anymore. It's that I'm open to sharing my real story, and then I'm better at understanding that those people also have unique and interesting stories that I'm sure I'm going to want to know about.
I love that. I think for what we're doing for Mindfully Gay and how we set our intention in the pipe ceremony and what we're saying now and seeing those things. How do we know? How do we know it's working? How do we know it's showing up? I think even before we start recording, we always have conversation about, are we getting people to the table? And we certainly have received feedback, right, from listeners and people that we know, etc. And what we have, hopefully we've been able to articulate is that we're not the experts here, right? As far as all the stuff that we're talking about, we're just talking from our own personal experiences, just talking from our hearts, exactly. And so when we invite folks to, send us their emails and hit us up on Instagram and all that kind of stuff, it is an invitation to present your voice. Introduce yourself, tell us your story. But it goes beyond that. Come on the show. Yeah. Right?
Bring a brick and lay it in the foundation with us.
That.
Yes.
Like, that's what this is.
Love
Listen
that.
to you, girl.
But that
She caught the spirit.
that's it though, Jerry. Like, I know this from experience with putting things out in the interwebs. Okay, I know that once you start getting negative feedback, that means you're actually getting viewership. You're getting to a critical place. And so, when you told me about those things, as I was walking to my car from the gym, I was starting to think, oh God, I don't want to know those things because I feel like it's going to shape the way that I present myself in this, and I don't want to ever do that because that's exactly what happened with porn, and that's why I can't do social media anymore, because I don't want to be influenced by what I think I need to do for the likes and the bullshit, and moreover, the people that are angry. I don't want to change the way we're talking. I want to invite them to be here so I can learn from them.
Yes.
Put your brick in the foundation.
Love that.
Like, come and be a part. So I think that this is a community effort. Of course, I mean, by all means, please write in when you are offended by something or you think something needs to be different. But be prepared to be a part of it. Roll up your sleeves and show up and be here with us.
Because we want to hear it. Like you said, we'll probably learn. Encountering people kind of out in the world out there, like at the gym, for example, when you were saying that, what came to mind was, instead of objectifying someone, which I do, but then I have to go, okay, I have to be finished with that.
Yep.
and go to the next layer. Yep. And maybe the next layer for me is, how can that person be a teacher to me? Mm-hmm. What can I learn from that person? And maybe I can teach them something. And I think that gives it a little bit more depth to, the potential of connection, conversation, community, etc. And I think that might even get us out of that scope of, if I'm going to go to this thing, how am I going to look, and how am I going to be presented and seen and all of that. But to go to that next level. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would argue that everything we've talked about is definitely part of that mental health, mental fitness that we started out about, right? It's about a certain layer of consciousness. It's a willingness to be aware that I'm not at the affect of what's happening around me, but I'm running a narrative.
Yes.
And my narrative is informed by whatever story or dry bones I'm dragging around. Mm-hmm. And that part of that mental fitness is a willingness not only to just challenge it cognitively,
right,
but to actually put myself in places
physically,
and opportunities that might invite me to let go, shift, and engage something new.
Yes.
And so I'm no longer a victim of the gay community. I'm a participant.
You're moving around.
And I would even argue I have the potential, you do, I do, you do, anyone listening, those who are showing up,
right,
whether it's here or in other platforms,
right,
by showing up and allowing this more compassionate narrative drive me, I actually then do shift the cultural narrative.
You do. Mm-hmm.
And I get exactly what I'm looking for.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. That's what we're manifesting. Like you said, we're getting what we're asking for.
Yeah.
It's that ripple effect. It really is.
So you want to do 3 sets, 8 to 12 reps each. Engage your core.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because it brings us back to physical.
Yes. Because
it's interchangeable. They work in tandem. They work together. You can, as far as faking it till you make it, it works both ways. You can try the behavioral thing, like, I don't know how to lift this weight, but I'm just going to go for it anyway, or think about it and visualize it, like, think I need to do this and engage my core and all of that. But they work together. Mm-hmm. And what I think happens, and that this is what's going to be the topic of our third part of this series, is when these things flow, the kind of this physical, mental, physical, and you can get to that place of kind of broadening your perspectives on things and thought processes and trying things out and stepping in and behaving in a new way perhaps to shift those stories, something else happens. Something else happens on a level that isn't quite as tangible and maybe not as easy to talk about, and maybe not so many words that we can, easily attached to, but it is the spiritual. I think something happens.
I have to say, I feel it. I can't articulate. I know exactly what you're saying. I can't put words to it, but the way I've explained it is that I just feel better in this world. I I'm better. I just feel better in this physical space, in this world, and the things that I see and count. Like it's just better. And I think that's the spiritual aspect for me. I just feel better in this world.
That really is it. And looking at it from kind of a yogic perspective, it is that if you work the 8 limbs of yoga and make your way up to the 8th limb, which is enlightenment and bliss, it's exactly that. It's everything is as it should be, and I'm all right. I can exist with it all, and I'm fine. That's a liberated self that you can in even in the 4 agreements. Don't take things personally. It's that if you can just let things go and just be. And not be, how's it go? Not be of the world. I forget how that phrase goes, but you can experience the world, but not be influenced or affected by it so grandly. You can be a part of it. I think that's that spiritual path that we can be on.
Well, the equivalent when we sit in a lodge, a lodge can be kind of warm.
Oh my God.
I'll tell the story. Carolyn was one of my teachers, and she was this older woman, and kind of just a very graceful and fluent woman. And we used to call her Cookum Carolyn because it would always be like these really hot lodges. And when I was younger, they'd open up the door and I'd be like looking at the back of the lodge. I'd just been moving around and wrestling around, and I was just like, how do you? But Carolyn would just be there, and here's this older woman who's taking on the temperature of the lodge. And I asked her, I said, how do you do that? How do you do that? Because sometimes I can't find my ass like halfway through the lodge.
Right.
And she said, I've learned to be like the grandfathers or the rocks. Ooh. I've learned to be still in the most extreme circumstances. And of course, 100 years later, I'm sitting in that space, and I find that when I'm still and when I'm focused, whatever's happening around me does not have to consume me.
Right.
And so... And I have found in my work with other medicines as well as Lodge that same concept. And when I've gone through difficult times in my life, I have found that if I'm just still, and though I tell people in Lodge, we're in here for such a short time. And that's true of everything that we're dealing with in our lives. If I just stay focused, focused on where my thoughts are going, focused on my connections, that I will get through the situation.
Yes.
Stillness is very powerful.
Very powerful.
And it doesn't have to, all the other stuff doesn't have to stick.
Exactly.
But that takes discipline.
Practice. You have to practice.
And
Yeah.
practice.
That's the meditation aspect is what helped me get to a place of stillness in my mind.
Yeah.
And that is a relief when you can do that. Oh my God.
Let's test that out on Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is a relief. And I think we can kind of pause it right there. And I'm now more excited about our next, conversation, because we are going to talk about the spiritual, and because I think this is the great lead up. We can talk about these different medicines and that, and the result of it, when we are able to sit in that stillness and just be in that happiness, that blissful state. Like, what is that, and how do you get there? Let's have that conversation.
Yeah.
So we continue to invite you to contribute to this conversation, the physical, mental, spiritual fitness and how you see it. What's your story? We do want to hear from you. Send us the email, hit us up on the socials, come to an event if you're in town. Be a guest on the show. You don't have to physically be here. There are ways, we've got technology, there are ways that you can share your story on this show. We can do an interview by phone. We can do it on Zoom. We do want to hear your story, want to hear your contribution, because you have something to share. You have something to share.
You have a brick to lay in this foundation.
Yes.
Definitely.
Yes. So we leave it at that. Thank you so much. We appreciate you. I appreciate these gentlemen. And we'll continue this story. So thanks again for joining us on this episode of Mindfully Gay. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Mindfully Gay podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation today, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. This way you won't miss out on any of our upcoming episodes where we continue to explore fascinating topics and share meaningful stories. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next episode.